Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. Today we're going to take a look at my team selection ahead of Game Week 9, but let's start off with having a look at how the team performed in Game Week 8. So in Game Week 8, I wasn't very happy with my rank going into it. I pushed the wildcard button. So now looking at my lineup, I'm very happy with how it's set up for the weeks ahead. Obviously, it's always nice to get a big green arrow after wildcarding, and that is what happened in my case. Over a 1 million rank rise. I've halved my rank from 2.3 million to just outside the top million. So very, very happy with that. A large part of that was thanks to Mo Salah, obviously 15 points, and I chose to captain him. I was always looking at captaining either him or Heung-min Son, but in the end, I favoured Salah for the expected minutes and the fact that I really fancied that fixture at Brighton. Now, with Son, anyone who captained him, I think you can consider yourselves very, very unlucky. He could have easily hauled, and I think the red card really played into the way that the match panned out as well. So anyone who captained Son, I think you can consider yourselves very unlucky. However, it's nice to get a bit of variance my way for once, and this season has been a bit of a grind. So getting those 15 points, including that penalty, which is fairly lucky for Mo Salah as well, was really good for my side. Outside of that, Turner in goal, getting the clean sheet. Obviously very happy with that, and he'll probably be my starting keeper at home to Luton this week as well. In defence, the only one who returned was a doggy with a 6-pointer, obviously kept the clean sheet at Luton, and then Maddison getting the assist for the 1 goal in the Luton game as well. Outside of that, the only other one who returned was Ollie Watkins with another assist, but 65 points in what was a fairly low scoring game week on average is a really nice green arrow, and I'm very happy with how my team's set up going into Game Week 9. So let's start looking at that team selection ahead of Game Week 9 now, and it's worth noting that I do have 0.7 in the bank. It was a conscious decision on my wildcard to save that little bit of money because I've got some future moves planned that I really needed that flexibility for, so hopefully that pays dividends. Moving on to the goalkeepers, and I'm hoping that Turner in goal will prove to be a shrewd pick for these 2 game weeks. Obviously in Game Week 8 it did pay off, he kept the clean sheet, but in Game Week 9 at home to Luton, I'm backing him to get a clean sheet, whereas Areola away at Aston Villa feels like a fixture that they're probably going to concede in. He might get a save point or 2, but I'm still backing the chances of that clean sheet for Nottingham Forest at home to Luton. So Turner will stay in goal this week, and then probably after this week, it will be Areola to start in most game weeks. Moving into defence, and Matty Cash is going to be nailed into my starting lineup for the foreseeable. I think this fixture is probably the hardest one of the upcoming run for Aston Villa, and West Ham at home, they'll probably score. I expect that to be a both teams to score kind of game, but Matty Cash's underlying data going forwards is good enough that I'm happy to play him even in slightly more difficult fixtures. And as it stands, I'm pretty happy with starting him over the likes of Aguerd, who has limited upside. And like I mentioned with Areola, I do expect both teams to score in that game. And in comparison, I think Matty Cash is more likely to get that attacking return. Moving across to a doggy at home to Fulham, I don't think we need to talk about that too much. It's a pretty nice fixture for Spurs, decent chance of a clean sheet and decent chance of attacking returns as well. I think if I had a bit more money spare, other than that 0.7 I've scurried away for now, I would have preferred to have Pedro Porro in my wildcard 11, but I still think a doggy is a decent enough punt at 4.8 million, but I got him for 4.5, so I've still got that value tied up in him. So realistically, I wasn't going to get rid of him on my wildcard. Ideally, Porro would have been better, but I'm happy enough with a doggy, and he'll be starting for the next few game weeks as well for me. Moving over to Dan Burn. Now, again, it was a sacrifice I needed to make on my wildcard to make sure that I could make those moves elsewhere. But I think Burn covers off that Newcastle clean sheet pretty well, and he's not got no attacking threat. He could be good for a goal every now and then. So at home to Crystal Palace, who aren't scoring a lot of goals at the moment. Obviously, they're without Eberechi Eze as well at the moment, so those injury worries are piling up for them. I'm hoping that their attacking threat is somewhat subdued. That's what we we saw last week as well. So fingers crossed that Newcastle can keep the clean sheet against Crystal Palace at home. As I mentioned, on the bench, Aguerd away at Villa and Taylor away at Brentford. I don't think either of them are good enough options to be starting ahead of that back three. So let's move on to the midfield. So this week I'm back to 5 men in midfield, and last week it was a 3-4-3 formation with Gordon sat on the bench. Obviously he was suspended last week, but I was excited about his prospects coming into my starting 11 when a lot of other managers probably would have avoided him because he had that suspension. Other than that, I think that Mo Salah is going to be in the conversation for captaincy this week, but at the moment I think he's going to be my vice captain. Obviously did really well last week. I'm very happy to own him, and there will be weeks where I do captain him for the upcoming run all the way through to game week 16. But I think there is one better captaincy shout this game week, which I'll be discussing in just a minute. Outside of that, Son at home to Fulham and Maddison at home to Fulham. Again, good fixture for the Spurs boys. Not looking at selling either of them this week. But next week, obviously, Arsenal come into some really good fixtures, and one of them looks fairly likely to go for the likes of a Bukayo Saka or a Martinelli, for example. So that's where that 0.7 million is safely guarded away for now. It means that I can get across to Bukayo Saka straight from Maddison without having to make sacrifices elsewhere as well. So it keeps that avenue open for me. In terms of the match itself, I do think that Fulham will try to low block Spurs, and Fulham have quite a bit about them. They're not a bad side by any means, but they are conceding a few goals at the moment. And Son and Maddison, I expect them to do fairly well against that Fulham back line. I think it's a good fixture to hold either for. Not quite good enough for captaincy for me, considering the options elsewhere, but I think Son, considering he played 90 minutes in midweek for South Korea, should be fit enough to start, and he should get probably 75, 80 minutes again. Maddison didn't really play at all, in fact, in the Italy game in midweek for the Euros qualification for England. So hopefully he'll have had a little bit of rest, and any sort of underlying doubts for Maddison's fitness and him getting taken off early, hopefully will be a thing of the past as well. So happy to own both of them going into game week 9. Bowen against Aston Villa away from home. Now, again, like I mentioned with Aguerd and Areola, I think that this is probably one of the tougher fixtures for West Ham in the upcoming run, but I still think that Aston Villa and West Ham are both pretty likely to score in this fixture, and Bowen seems as likely as anyone to be the man on the end of it for West Ham. Obviously, he didn't get too many minutes either for England over the international break, especially in that second week, so he should be nicely rested and hopefully fit enough to get 90 minutes against Aston Villa away. So very happy to own him, and the fixtures coming for West Ham look really, really nice from next week onwards. So I think that hopefully he's going to pay dividends for me over the upcoming stretch of fixtures, with maybe this one not being the ideal fixture for him. Outside of that, obviously I mentioned Anthony Gordon already, but Crystal Palace at home should be a pretty decent fixture for Newcastle. He's one of the best budget picks in the game at the moment, for my money anyway. And even though I do like the looks of Pedro Neto, because Anthony Gordon plays for probably a better side and in a more attacking side, and the fact that Harvey Barnes is out injured until the new year, I think his minutes should be fairly secure. And for that sort of money, having an attacking prospect for Newcastle should be really good value. So very happy to own him for the upcoming run of games. And obviously Crystal Palace at home is a nice fixture anyway. Just one final note on Mo Salah. So obviously the Everton at home fixture is a pretty good fixture for Liverpool, but Everton so far have actually been pretty decent on the underlying data so far this season, and because it's the early kickoff as well, sometimes Liverpool do struggle just that little bit with the early kickoff. So I think it's enough to dissuade me from having Mo Salah as my captain, especially when there's a really viable alternative that I would say, even if they both played at the same time on a Sunday, I'd probably prefer the alternative anyway. So let's discuss that now, and hopefully that is my midfield 5 locked in for game week 9. So moving into the forward line, and it's a very popular forward line at the moment of Haaland and Ollie Watkins. So starting off with Watkins, West Ham at home again. I've mentioned it already a couple of times on this episode, but I think it's a fixture where both teams are probably expected to score in, and Ollie Watkins is on a hell of a hot streak at the moment. He's returned in all but one Premier League match so far this season, so very happy to own him. And Aston Villa's fixtures after this game week are really, really tasty. So looking forward to having Ollie Ollie Watkins for the next stretch of fixtures. This one isn't ideal, but I still think he's got a decent chance of returning in it. Haaland is going to be my captain this week at home to Brighton. I think that's a great fixture. Brighton are a fantastic side, but they do leave themselves open at the back quite often, and Liverpool benefited from it last week, I think, and I hope that Haaland and Man City are going to benefit from it this week. Now, the one thing to note is Man City haven't been on the best form of late, but it's important to note that Rodri has been out for all of those games where they've lost, and with him coming back into the side, I would expect that Man City will look more of a well-polished team going into game week 9, and I don't think you can keep Haaland down forever. He's been on a little bit of a cold streak, been somewhat unlucky in certain matches as well. He's going to be desperately hungry to get back up and running, and I do think that this is a good fixture that will suit the way that Man City want to play. Brighton are going to push them high and hopefully leave spaces in behind. Haaland running in behind to any balls played in behind that high line is going to be really promising, and I hope that it's enough to prove that he's going to be the best captaincy option this game week. I'm hoping for a bit of a haul there, but obviously Salah's a great option, Son's a great option, possibly even Maddison isn't a bad option this week either, and there are arguments for all of the above. But for me, I'm backing Haaland to get back to goal scoring ways this week in a big way, and hopefully that pays off with him as my captain for game week 9. So there you have it, my team selection for game week 9. I'm not looking at making a transfer this week as it stands, but obviously things can change. I'm recording this Wednesday evening, so things might change. Team news might come out in the next couple of days. So by the time that I post this, maybe even something has changed. So it's important to note that I will be posting my final team selection ahead of game week 9 on X on the day as well. So do follow me over there at FPL Pricey. In the meantime though, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. And as always, if you've got any questions ahead of game week 9, do post them in the comments below so I can answer them before the deadline. In the meantime, I hope you all have a fantastic game week 9, and I'll see you on the other side of it as we get prepared for game week 10.